Hello, super sentence stackers. Thanks for tuning in to the nation's story. I actually am so flabbergasted by the amount of effort all of you are making. We've had writing from 4-year-olds, and today we had a piece of writing from a grandparent who was 84. The involvement across the UK and across the world has been astounding, and I actually think the quality of the writing is improving every day. You're taking so much pride in it, and actually it really is heartwarming for me. And actually teachers are telling me that it brightens their days as they read all the submissions as they come in. Today's story is called Paperman, and I'm going to do a roll call of the children who have made it in today's story for the nation. Benedict Moriarty, you wrote plot point 1, you're 11. Joshua Cohen, you're 8, you wrote plot point 2. Hannah Kirk, you're 9, you wrote 3. James Cartmail, you wrote plot point 4 and you're 10 years old. Daniel Parker, you're 10 and you wrote plot point 5. Bill Okazi, you're 11 and you wrote plot point 6. Naomi Leach, you're 9 and you wrote plot point 7, thank you. Cara Bauer, you're 8 years old, writing plot point 8. And Theo Uten, you're 7 years old, writing our finish for plot point 9. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for writing within your chunks, and I've sewn it all together for today's story. Paperman. George stood on the blustery platform, papers clasped protectively to his chest. Trains rushed past. Civilization was running about its work. Suddenly, a sheet of pale white paper emerged from the shadows of the morning, smacking into his shoulder. He glanced down to find that the paper had been sucked off him and pulled into the breeze. It swirled away, closely followed by a woman with vibrant lips that sparkled like rubies in the sunrise. Gazing down, George saw her retrieve the sheet, returning it to the pile in her arms, and walk over to stand next to him. Eyes shyly flickered towards him and back to her notes. A trailer sped past, rendering one of George's papers airborne, and whacked the woman in the face. He swiftly removed it to see the woman's face laughing, and looking down, he observed that her lips had imprinted a rosy mark on it, and they both began to chuckle. He watched her in a moment get on the train, and as she disappeared into the horizon, he was left alone. The lady had been carrying papers just like him. She must be going to work too. George's eyes filled with interest. And then work. He eventually got to work. And when he got there, thud. A humongous pile of papers covered his desk, and he absent-mindedly found himself staring out of the window. His jaw dropped. It was her, the woman. She was there, opposite, in a different skyscraper, also at work. His brain whirled. Aeroplanes, he thought. Paper aeroplanes. This pile of paper might come in use. He carefully folded up a piece of what used to be his boring work, and he aimed it precisely and through. The plane did a couple of loop-the-loops, then dropped into the manic city below. How was he gonna catch her attention? She was as beautiful as an English rose, bright, delicate, eye-catching. He flung out the window and he started waving, jumping, shouting to try and catch her attention. Meg, the lady, sadly didn't notice. However, his boss was watching him and started to cough loudly, which caught George's attention, and he pretended to get back to work. George was determined to catch her eye, so he constructed many paper aeroplanes. The first one floated down to the ground, and he watched as the second glided towards the window, but it hit the wall. And as Meg didn't even realise what was happening, she turned away. And George was filled with disappointment. On his final attempt, he went to throw the plane, but his boss rushed to snatch the plane out of his hand, slamming the window shut and demanding that he get back to work. George was adamant not to give in. He grabbed the treasured paper and it reminded him of Meg, and he started folding it again. He held it outside the window and a tempestuous gust blew it out of his hand. Oh, he was so crestfallen. What was he going to do? George's heart began to beat faster and faster and faster as Meg occupied his mind. This was confusing. There was one piece of paper left and he needed to know what to do. Everyone seemed to bounce off the hard surface and not quite make it. Oh dear, he was getting into such a state, and the paper aeroplanes seemed to have a mind of their own. At that moment, he kissed one of his aeroplanes and it headed out, zooming through the newspapers, past the newspaper stand, past the flowers, and he just needed the woman to find it. Oh, every piece of paper didn't quite make it, and George walked away, now down on the streets. The surroundings were grey, like his feelings. He felt desolate and devoid. And then he noticed in an alleyway where all the planes had gathered. All the failed planes had reunited. And then they danced, darted and flitted and hastily started to gather like a cyclone, and it emerged in the alleyway just as George was walking past. And as they bounced in single file behind George, the planes harassed him. They were moving him along. He helplessly stumbled along the road, and as the cars hurtled by, he was dragged along with the planes, and his eyes were filled with bewilderment. A plane zoomed past him as if to signal, and other bystanders were wondering what was happening. They seemed to be luring him towards somebody, maybe Meg. The wind caught his piece of paper and he was dancing and swirling and was being led towards the train station. And simultaneously, all the planes jumbled up together. They snatched George and forced him on the train as powerfully as a magnet, focused, strong and insistent. Meg followed onto the plane too. They were in different carriages and she was sat happily, but George was shoved on the plane. It was like the paper were pulling him together, pulling them both together. George was pushed by the planes and they were as strong as lions, and they twirled him around, making him spin like a clumsy ballerina, wooden, jerky, heavy. Meg followed her letter, and both of them were getting pushed closer. The train doors slid open, and George was swung through the door. Concerned, Meg stepped out of the door and gazed around. And then that was it. George saw Meg. Meg saw George. They were now on a new platform, and the paper planes had stepped them closer. They dropped to the ground, and the pair looked amazingly at each other. Oh, what a wonderful story. What precise language. I can see you've used all your thesaurus thinking, and don't think I haven't noticed some of the power of three that you've used there. I love how J.K. Rowling has influenced our writing today with some wonderful multi-clause sentences. And you've dragged some of that wind language through the writing to make it breezy and interesting to read. Oh, super sentence stackers, you really do cheer me up every day. And remember to take part tomorrow. This film that our writing is based on tomorrow is called Rooted. Oh, and I am certainly rooting for this film. Two trees who are desperately to get close to each other, but they're planted on either side of the path. I can't wait to meet you in the Super Sentence Stacker classroom tomorrow at 9:45. I'd love to see you there. I'd love to see you all there, whether you're 4, whether you're 104. I love it when adults take part in the writing challenges too. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow in the classroom at 9:45.